Hello everyone, welcome to this Canvas API series. By the end of this video, you will learn how to create a bar chart on Canvas API and how to animate it. So let's get started. I have my local up and running. I have already created a basic canvas here where I have the size of canvas as 500 by 500 and I have added some styling to it with a border of 2 pixels solid black and some margin to it. You can pause the video and take a look what all changes I have done. We are given two arrays. One depicts the months and the other depicts the spending in each of that month. And we need to showcase this using a bar chart. After creating that bar chart, we'll learn how to animate the bars in that bar chart. So for our use case, we need to create that bar chart on page load. So we'll add our code inside a use effect hook, but you can make changes accordingly if you need to render that bar chart on a button click or in any other scenario. So for our use case, we'll create a use effect hook. I'll provide it an empty dependency array so that our code runs only on first page load. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to take our data and create bars out of it. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to create a for loop. Inside that for loop, we have a variable index, and this index will go until the size of spending array. Inside this, for each of the spending, we are going to create a bar. So for that, first let's understand the coordinates of our canvas. So the coordinates here depicts 0, 0 at the top left corner, and we are going to add some length in the y-axis and add some dynamic length on the x-axis for each of those bars. Furthermore, each of the bar will have some length and width according to the data which we have provided. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to use the fillRect function provided by Canvas API. This function takes in 4 parameters. The first two are the coordinates where we want to render a rectangle, and the second two are the width and height of that rectangle. So for our x coordinate, we are going to first have this x parameter a variable value because each of the bar will be rendered one after the other. So we need to have some dynamic x value for each of those bars. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to take a random value, let's say 30, and multiply that by the index of each of the bars. For y, we'll have some padding from the y-axis. So for that, let's have a constant y value of 20. Now the width of the bars we want constant. So let's give the bars a width of 30. And the height will be basis on the data which we have here, which is the spending data. So for that, we'll use spending and the index of that element. If I save this, we have some bars visible here, right? But what we see here is the bars are connected with each other and they are starting from the extreme left. So for that, let's add some padding first from the left side. So for that, we'll add a constant value here in the x-axis parameter of fillRect. Let's say 30. If I save this, we have some padding on the left side, but the bars are still connected with each other. So for that, what we're going to do is we are going to play with the value which with we multiplied the index. So we'll place it as, let's say 40. If I save it, there's some gap which I can see. So this value 40 goes in proportion with the width of the bar which we have placed. So while placing these values, keep in mind that the width of the bars should be less than the value which you are multiplying with the index so that they do not stick with each other. We can even increase this and increase the width as well of the bars. If I save this, it's much better. So after that, let's extrapolate height so that the bars are better visible. So I'll multiply the height by 10. Save this. This is much better. Now let's give our bars a different color. So for that, we are going to use the fill style property provided by Canvas, and we are going to place blue here. If I save this, our bars are blue. Now the bars which we have here are getting drawn from top to bottom. What we want is for them to draw from bottom to top. So for that, we'll need to play with the y-axis of the canvas. We'll apply simple mathematics here and make changes with the y-axis. So our canvas size is 500 by 500. We need some padding before we draw our bars. Let's say the padding be 20, and then we need to draw those bars from a particular height, which will be the extrapolated value which we have drawn here. So this would be spending index into the extrapolated value. So what our y-axis becomes is 500 minus 20, which is the padding which we want, minus the extrapolated value or the height which we have for each of the bar. If I save this, let me close this so that you can see the formula, and we have our bars here perfectly drawn. Let's add some more paddings and spread the bars out in the entire canvas. For that, what we're going to do is we're going to play around with the values here. I'm going to make a few changes. Save this. I can add, I guess, some padding to the left. Yep. So we have our bars ready according to the extrapolated values. So now what we're going to do is we are going to render the axes for this bar chart and render our data on those axes. So for that, we are going to use the move to and line to property provided by Canvas API. So we are going to move our context first to a coordinate. At this point, the coordinates are 80, which is here, and the coordinates here are 460, which is here. So we need the axis bit before this first bar which we have drawn. So for that, we are going to move our context to, let's say, 60, and the y would be 40. Why is that? We want to draw the axis, but we don't want to draw the axis from the top. We want to draw that axis from someplace here, like this. So this size could be 40 and this could be 60. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create a line. For that, we are going to use the line to functionality of Canvas API. Again, the x would be 60 and y would be 460. To create the x-axis, we are going to again use the line to property. This time, the x value will go to 460 and the y value will remain 460. And I'll call contextref.current.stroke. Save it. And you can see the x is perfectly drawn on the canvas. I guess we can make the x value to 480 to extend this. Yeah. And maybe decrease the line width. Context is not, okay, sorry. So this would be contextref.current.line width. If I save this. Yeah. So we have our axis ready, the y-axis and the x-axis. Now we are going to render the text on the axis. So for that, we are going to use the fill text property. This function takes 4 parameters. The first one is the text which we want to render, and the coordinates where we want to render the text, and lastly an optional parameter max width. I'm not going to go into much detail about max width. You can take a look at the documentation for further details. Now we need to decide first what we need to render on this y-axis. Since we have numerical data which we need to render, we are going to show 0 here and we will go up till 100. But we need to decide the coordinates from where we need to start rendering. So let's say we have a gap of 20 and we are going to render from 80 up till 0. So for each of the gap of 20, we are going to render the data from 0 to 100. Right now what we have is this height is 40 and this height is 40. So we need to start from a gap of 40 from the top and go till a gap of 40 at the bottom, which is 460. So we'll start from 40 and we'll go till 460. And we are going to render 6 values with a gap of 20. So I'm going to create a for loop, and this for loop will run 6 times from 0 to 5. Inside that, I'm going to call this fill text function. So the text would be 100 minus 20 into count. For count 0, 100 will be rendered, and after that, as count increments, we'll decrease 20 each time till it goes 0. So for count 5, the value which will get rendered is 0. The x coordinate would be 60, which we decided here. So x coordinate would be 60, and y coordinate would be 40, which is the initial gap which we decided, plus we would require some dynamic value to render the data. So let's get that dynamic value as well. So if top distance is 40 and the bottom distance is 40, so the remaining distance which we have here from top to bottom will be 420, because 400 minus 80, 420. And in this 420, we need to render 5 gaps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we need to render 5 gaps, we will have our difference of 84 between each of the values which we render. So we'll do 84 into count. So each of the values will get rendered at a distance of 84 on the canvas. If I save this, we have 100, 80, 60, 40, 20, 0. Let me decrease the x coordinate, or we can decrease more. Let's go till 30. Moreover, what we can do is we can change the fill style to black to match with the axis color. We have 100, 80, 60, 40, 20, 0 as you can see. What we see is 100 is almost at the top, and we could add more padding to it. So let's add more padding at the top. So here we go till 60. As soon as I save this, our 0 goes down because we have added more padding to the top. So what happened is we have 60 padding at top and we have 40 padding at bottom. What is the remaining height here is 400, where we need to render the data. So 400 by 5 gaps becomes 80. This time our dynamic value will change from 84 to 80. If I save this, and it gets rendered perfectly. Now let's add a small marking here as well, so that it's much easier to read the data. For that, what we are going to do is we are going to call contextWrap.moveTo. We need each line a bit after each of the text. So we have, for each of the values, we have our x value as 30. So we can place the markings after 30. Let's say x be 40. And the y value would be again this dynamic value which we decided, and we are going to create a line till this y-axis which has coordinate of 60, comma, again the dynamic value which we decided, and then we are going to call the stroke functionality. Save this, and we can see the markings available. Let's reduce the size. For that, we are going to increase the x-axis value of move to. Save this. And yeah, this is much better. As you can see, our data is properly visible on the y-axis with proper markings. Similarly, what we are going to do is showcase the data on the x-axis. So for that, we are going to traverse our months array, and we are going to again use the fill text property. And this time we are going to play with the x coordinate of canvas. So our text would be simply months index. Let's come back to x coordinate later. Our y coordinate would be, if this is 460, we can render the data a little below here. So let's say 480, and our x coordinate would be the position where we rendered each of the chart. So that is here, 80 into index plus 80. Paste and save. As you can see, our data is rendered properly. We can add some more padding to the x coordinate, let's say 100. Save this, and it's much better. So the data is properly rendered on the y-axis and the x-axis. If you see, there is one issue with our chart. So here what we see is that the spending value for each of these bars is 15, 30, 10, 25 and 40. But if you look at this last chart itself, it's going up to 100. Why is that case? Is because we have extrapolated the charts, but we have not extrapolated them correctly. We need to change this extrapolating value and showcase the data properly on this chart. So for that, what we are going to do is, let's first remove this extrapolated value. And after saving, we see that the chart is rendering according to the data which we have. And now this bar here represents 40, but actual 40 is here. On this axis, this marking itself is 10. So what we need to do is, instead of extrapolating by 10, what we need to do is, we need to extrapolate it such that it goes till here, which is 10 times of 4, which becomes 40. So instead of extrapolating by 10, we can extrapolate it by 4. And that's how our bar will come to 40 here. Similarly would be the case for all of the remaining bars. So instead of extrapolating by 10, we extrapolate by 4 and save this. And if you see now, our data is much properly rendered based on the data present on the y-axis. Now we have a chart ready. What we can do now is we can animate our chart. So to animate charts, there are several ways. So the first is the set interval method. So the set interval method is not the most optimized way to animate the chart because it can cause lag on a web page if there are a lot of charts available to render or if the data is more to be shown. So for that, instead of using the set interval property, we are going to use the request animation frame property provided by the browser. And this property gives the browser the ability to decide when to render the bars and not block the main thread. So first we are going to create a function const create animated bars, and we'll move this lines from there to here and call this function here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to create a variable. We'll call that %completed, and this variable helps us decide how much of the bars are rendered on the page. At the bottom of the create animated bars function, we are going to check if the %completed value is less than 100. If it's less than 100, we are going to call the request animation frame functionality. Inside that, we are going to recursively call our create animated bars function. Moreover, in each of the recursive call, we are going to implement our %completed variable. Now, in each of the render, what we need to do is we need to render some part of our bar. So for that, we are going to play with the height property of our bars. So first, let's take out the height value in a variable. Our height variable is 4 into spending index, and we are going to replace this with height here and here. Now we need to render only the percentage amount of charts we want to show. So for that, we are going to use the %completed variable and divide it by 100. If I save it, you can see animation happening on the bars. If I refresh, a perfect animation happening. So how it works is, initially the %completed value is 1. So in the first render, only the 100 part of the bars got rendered. At the next call, 2 by 100 of the bars got rendered, and the recursion kept on happening until our %completed became 100. So I can control the speed of this animation by incrementing our %completed with different values. So let's say I increment it by 5. The animation would happen faster. If I save this, let's refresh and check again. See, it's happening much faster. This is on how you increment your %completed variable, the speed of the animation will be decided. So that's how you animate your charts in Canvas API. So now we have shown our data properly on the Canvas API with proper data on our y-axis and our x-axis and proper animation. So that's it for this video. I hope you like it. I'll see you in the next one.